Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is April 4th, Monday, April 4th, 2022. Time for another week, another show, another year. Let's start over. Let's just get a different year and use that instead. No one will notice the difference. It's not like 2022 has been so great or anything, right? Why not start over? You want to start over 1 year ahead, 2 years ahead? Let's, I guess we can just figure it out. Okay, let's see. What have we for the morning? Seemed like a lousy news weekend, just in terms of like the tenor of the news that we received. Things getting extremely ugly in Ukraine, and I think it was probably inevitable. Maybe even if the war had gone smoother for the Russians as they thought it might, it still might have been terrible. They're not particularly friendly people to fight wars against, it seems. At least not under, I don't know, any of their leaders in the past 100-something years. But, all right, well, we'll catch up on that, of course. Plenty happening elsewhere as well. Things happening here in the United States. Just mostly regular old stupid, but it's just, it's no fun to have nowhere to turn for, something looking up somewhere. It'd be nice. Unemployment news, that was good, I guess. Although, apparently, for whatever reason, the news media organizations are, once again, out to turn it into bad news. I think I saw a collection of headlines. Did Eric Bollard put together a collection of headlines on this today? I think so. But I think a couple of them caught my eye outside of the collection. Running wild, as it were. And there's, the basic approach is unemployment at an all-time low. And here's why that's bad news. It's difficult to find workers. Well, yeah. That's because they're all employed. And trying to find other people who aren't employed, well, there's a record low number of them. And, of course, you've built a giant wall in the way of all the people who want to come and find work. So, I think eventually it's going to catch up with you. All right, let's see. Bill has tweeted us a message for the morning. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. And I'm telling you, that is to say, Bill is telling you, if Kagro X, that is to say me, catches you, that is to say you, I didn't realize this was going to happen, catches you not wearing a baseball cap with a 4-foot by 5-foot American flag sewn into it, as you declared Trump the capture of Osama bin Laden, you're in big trouble. Yes, big news over the weekend. Trump had a campaign style, not for him, but for other people, it was a campaign rally in Michigan over the weekend. And I believe it was in Washington, Michigan, which was confusing looking at all the headlines and captions that I saw. But Michigan, nonetheless. And at least the first news I saw out of it, first word I had that it was even being held, which is kind of good news. I'm glad we don't know, we don't spend so much time hearing about, oh my gosh, he's going to have a rally and they're going to cover it. But okay, he's still former, but they still do cover it. And we had a member of Congress, someone I know nothing about, some, I guess, freshman, I don't know, I guess I should look it up, Republican Congresswoman in her time slot at the rally, used her time on stage to talk about, well, one, of course, how weak Joe Biden was and how strong and strongly strong, very soon, very shortly, strongly, even more strongly strong candidate and just person in general that Donald Trump was. And in fact, he was so strong that, of course, you all remember, he's the one who caught and killed Osama bin Laden. Not during his administration. He caught and killed him himself, I guess. Strangled him with his bare hands. Of course, many of you may remember that, as I did see someone say on Twitter, that Donald Trump was a game show host at the time that Osama bin Laden was captured and killed. I understand the confusion. I confuse the two of them in my mind all the time, Osama bin Laden and Donald Trump. And I think they should both be buried the same way. But that's no reason to confuse the two. I think you should be able to sort it out in your mind. But she probably really does believe that. And there's no accounting for it. That rally, as I understand it, Trump gave his usual meandering hour and 45-minute speech, which is what I do each morning. I don't know why I'm not president. But he gave his usual speech, and apparently, I guess for whatever reason, Maggie Haberman was commenting. I don't think she went to cover it or anything. But I think she started out thinking, oh, this is going to be different. She tweeted earlier, this is not his usual grievance fest. He's actually, campaigning for other people and sounding like a candidate for the first time in however many years. But I think, a few minutes later tweeted, no, I guess I was wrong. This is going to be the regular grievance fest. It's now become an hour-plus long rant on how he had the election stolen from him, et cetera, et cetera. But even when he was sounding like a candidate, he was doing grievance work to the extent that he does work on anything. Trump made prominent mention of the fact that he was there chiefly to support the candidacies of some down-ballot state-level candidates as opposed to the local members of Congress and the Senate races, if there are any in Michigan this year. I don't even know. But that he was doing this thing. But basically, he's out hitting the road campaigning for Republicans who are running for Secretary of State or Elections Board, anybody that has control over declaring his election stolen from 2020 and doing anything. None of them have the authority to, reopen things, but they'll try it anyway. But that's the strategy. He's out there trying to sell the candidacies of Big Lie supporters who will come in and either, it may or may not matter to him whether they reverse what happened in 2020, but at the very least would agree to steal it for him in 2024 if he survives his high cholesterol and makes it that far. Or, Omicron BA2 doesn't kill him or something like that. Because that's out there too. Anyway, plenty of other things still going on, like Omicron BA2. Let me just check the figures this morning. Holding steady here in Loudoun County. It seems to be dropping locally, like super locally, Loudoun County area. But end of last week, the D.C. area, and we're still D.C. area, was spiking. Now, Loudoun had spiked earlier. Not spiked. It had gone up a little bit earlier, and I was getting concerned about it. And then when I heard it was spiking in the D.C. area, I thought it would just get worse. But for the time being, it seems to be holding steady or dropping in Loudoun County. That might mean nothing. Nobody knows anymore because all the testing is now done at home and nobody reports anything. And, of course, the federal assistance with the testing has dropped off. And now there are people who are arriving, finding out that the testing is no longer necessarily free and turning around and leaving. At least anecdotally, that seems to be the case. And I can understand that people would turn around and leave. I think when you find out, they tell you, they could bill you $100 and something for a PCR test. But you could go back to, the local pharmacy or supermarket and pick one up, a box of 2 for $24. It's not the PCR test, but if you want to know. And at this point, that's another thing. A lot of people don't even care to know anymore whether or not they've got COVID. Particularly among people who are have been vaccinated, they say, well, I'm doing what I can to avoid the thing, but if I got it, I got it. I'll just go home and ride it out. There's nothing to be done. There are things to be done, of course. There are therapeutics, but who knows whether they're covered anymore, how much you're going to be. I don't know. Well, I'll ask Greg Dworkin. He's here. Maybe he still knows the status of getting some of the therapeutics and what they'll charge you. They should charge you nothing because I understand stuff is still sitting around on shelves somewhere. They should be moving it out and giving it away for free like Halloween candy, except it's April. Easter candy. Perfect. Okay. Make an Easter egg hunt of it. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm fine. So it sort of depends upon where you are.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. If you're in New York City, there's free testing and there's free Paxlovid if you qualify, which is the 5-day regimen for the pill that's really designed to prevent severe symptoms. It's not designed to take away your headache. And it's mostly for high-risk people, but it exists. And there are testing stations that are free, and there's ways to get the medication that are free, and that's certainly not true everywhere.
Right.
And so it depends upon where you are. And I would think at this particular point in time, the percent positive testing is useful, but not nearly as useful as it was, because not everybody, as you point out, can get tested or can afford to get tested or does get tested. So using wastewater early and hospitalization late, too late, is probably the best way to figure out what's going on. So, yeah, we seem to be having the expected rise, but how significant it is, we don't know yet. It's one thing to be infected, and it's another thing to be really sick. So, this is the situation that people are trying to figure out, and it's too early to tell. But the idea that nothing is going to happen doesn't seem right, and the idea it's going to be terrible is way too early to say.
Okay. Well, we'll say it's terrible later.
Okay. Well, if it is, that's what we should say.
I don't say anything's terrible. You just wait. I'll say something's terrible before the show is over.
Well, it's our pundits responsible for their predictions that turn out to be wrong. Never. So say whatever you want.
I don't know what I'm worried about. Okay.
Right, they'll probably just give you a raise and put you on ABC or CBS, really, because CBS is the best place to go if you just lie about everything.
I'm going to have to get some illegality done quickly.
Who had a nice piece about that? Margaret Sullivan had a nice piece about that the other day about the galling cynicism of CBS News hiring Mick Mulvaney, which I thought was a very good piece. Sure. Access journalism takes the media to dangerous places when one side of the aisle is turning against democracy, and that's really the thing. You mentioned the rally in Michigan. I didn't catch the entire opening there. Did you talk about the crazy local lady who thought that Trump caught Osama bin Laden?
I did.
That there was never a war on his watch, that the election was stolen, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's cool. Why people who support that sort of thing, like Mick Mulvaney, who was the person who said get over it when he was referencing, trying to put the squeeze on Zelensky for Ukraine when it came time to try to blackmail him for Zelensky.
Yes. Okay.
You might recall, she says, that National Security Advisor John Bolton refused to get involved in whatever drug deal Gordon Sondland and Mulvaney are cooking up on behalf of Trump. And this is the guy that they hire.
Yes. Sure, why not? Throw him in there. By the way, the crazy lady who thought that that Trump killed Osama is formally, if you're addressing her formally, known as United States Representative Lisa McClain, member of Congress. She's current member of Congress. So just letting you know, I'll dig up what her committee assignments are. The crazy lady. Yes.
So just to give you an idea of how firm and astute Mick Mulvaney is as an analyst.
Yes.
Remember, he wrote this one. Oh. This is the headline. If he loses, Trump will concede gracefully.
Oh, yeah, that was a good call. Right, I've forgotten about that one. Well, but he's an
analyst. You're hiring him to do analysis.
Rats. That sucks.
But he gets everything wrong.
Yeah, well, so he's perfect.
So, what is CBS doing? So they're not over the criticism.
Well, they did say what they were doing, right? I mean, they said it was for access. What if the Republicans win? We're going to need access to Republicans, so let's hire a moron.
I don't know what's going on with America, but Trump is damn good for CBS.
I guess so. They all seem to be very
excited. What's good for General Boomus is good for the USA.
Whew. Well,
some Little Abner from the 50s.
Oh, no wonder. Okay, yeah, that one didn't register for me. Okay. Well, we like to have that kind of content, and brings back memories for a lot of people who like to have memories brought back. It's a nice thing to have a memory once in a while, right? Okay.
By the way, the app that Donald Trump once hoped would avenge his exile from social media and make him a MAGA Mark Zuckerberg has instead been lagging behind the likes of social networks like Wiz, Be Real, and Bloomer Random Video Chat.
Wow. Well, they're in good company.
Soup Sang wrote that. It's actually pretty funny.
That's great.
So that's not doing well. That's a Devin Nunes project, and so I'm thinking he's going to go the way of Mo Brooks, but not Mel Brooks, Mo Brooks.
Oh,
so we'll see what happens there.
That guy.
And other things that are going well for Trump: sacrificial lamb David Perdue mocked for doubling down on big lie that cost him a Senate seat. That's in Raw Story. Matthew Chapman.
All right.
Ted Cruz communications staffer Amanda Carpenter accused former Senator David Perdue of debasing himself with the same election lies that cost him re-election in his new bid to unseat Brian Kemp, which will probably fail, so I think that's important.
Helpful.
But let's step back and look at a little perspective here before we get to, obviously, the big story of the day, which is Ukraine. And David Brookman has a really fascinating piece here, a new paper, which he and his co-author have been working on for 5 years.
Wow.
Now, length of time to publish doesn't mean that it's good, but it happens to be really fascinating and getting a lot of attention from the social scientists and political scientists on Twitter. To understand impacts of partisan media on beliefs and attitudes, we paid regular Fox News viewers to watch CNN instead.
Yeah.
And our results should worry you.
I worry that you ran out of money.
But first, why do this?
Yes.
We have a lot of evidence partisan media affects vote choice, but we actually know little about why this might happen. What changes viewers' beliefs, attitudes, or priorities might accompany these shifts in votes? Received wisdom about why media matters emphasizes ideas we don't disagree with, but think miss an important part of the story. Partisan media filters which information they present viewers, leaving them with a warped understanding of factual reality. And we call this partisan coverage filtering. That is to say, you wouldn't know the economy is doing well under Biden if you watch Fox News, because all you see is gas prices. And people actually think, when you just poll the general public, that we've lost jobs.
Yes.
Which
people
we've
think
not.
That. We've
gained a tremendous number.
Jobs
right? But that's because that's how the media presents it. Yeah. But what about inflation and gas prices? Well, you're not covering the jobs part. Putin's Russia is a great example. Reports indicate many Russians are unaware of major facts about the invasion of Ukraine because Russian media doesn't report it.
Yes.
We show U.S. partisan media also filters information, leading to huge gaps in its viewers' knowledge that benefit its side, and we find this worrying for democracy. Many people think of partisan media just as putting a thumb on the scale for its side in elections.
Yeah, well, they are doing that, and it's working on Lisa McClain, too.
But upshot of our findings,
yes, I like the editing work that you're doing here,
is that it may undermine accountability.
Yes, live real-time editing. This is great. So
by hiding information from voters, they need to hold their side accountable.
All right, yes.
Right? One of my favorite results is that our respondents agreed. We conducted our experiment in September 2020, and after a month of watching CNN instead of the usual Fox News, our participants were less likely to agree if Donald Trump did something bad, Fox News would discuss it.
Less likely to agree that if
they learned that if Donald Trump did something bad, Fox News won't discuss it.
Okay.
They learned that.
All right. You paid them to learn
During
it.
September 2020, CNN gave viewers extensive information about Trump's failures to protect the U.S. from COVID, dangers posed by the virus. Fox barely did, instead largely telling viewers COVID was no big deal and Trump took it seriously anyway.
Okay.
Now, our control group was still watching Fox and saw a completely different reality. According to Fox, Biden and Democrats were cheering on violent protests supposedly ransacking American cities, and Democrats were trying to steal elections with mail-in ballots. And you wonder why people who watch Fox don't vote for Democrats. Well, with all this democracy stealing going on, why don't they just reject that? Because they're not hearing it.
All we have to do is pay them?
To watch. Those watching CNN instead of Fox were more likely to know about long COVID, that other countries were controlling the virus better. This is information scarcely mentioned on Fox. But group watching Fox thought Biden supported defunding police. This and other aspects of coverage, it affects on a broad range of attitudes. Biden supporters are happy to see it when police get shot. Democrats are trying to steal elections with fraudulent mail-in ballots. An overreaction to protest the police shooting at Jacob Blake. These are some of the things they specifically looked at. And we also find some evidence of what political scientists call agenda setting. Treatment group more likely to think COVID was more important than violent protests.
Okay.
The treatment group, that is to say, the people paid to watch CNN.
The treatment was money.
Treatment for their therapy for their, cult
CNN
behavior. Finally, treatment group, which started off very conservative, like Trump less after this. No effects on vote choice.
How much money did this cost? Why aren't we doing this at scale?
Right. Well, it doesn't affect their vote, but it certainly affects their attitude. And for now, we hope you think of partisan media differently and more like state media. Oh. And that's their working paper.
Oh.
And so I think the importance of it is that if you're talking about persuasion, if you can wean them off the poison, you have a chance to do it. It works.
All right.
You can get people to understand and change their attitude. And so then it becomes, well, if it doesn't change their vote, what do you do about that? Well, that's where it comes to the individual campaigns and the individual candidates. So if you're looking at a Wisconsin, for example, and you're dealing with the odious Ron Johnson, and you happen to have a terrific statewide Democratic party, run by Ben Wickler and doing good things, you have a chance to win there. And that's really the whole point. So when you talk about persuasion is still worth doing, but you have to be able to break the poison. If their only source of news is going to be their right-wing church and Fox News, it's not going to work. But if you can get other sources in there somehow, and that generally has to be local, then you have a better chance. That's why it's so important to fund local organizations.
I guess so. Do they report anywhere how much money they gave them and where they got that
It's too
money?
late now. You can't sign up anymore. Sorry.
Oh, well, not so much that. Although that would be a great way to raise funds for paying for more of it. But I'm just sort of curious if it's like
it's
$15 a person.
I don't have the full paper at my fingertips.
All
so
right.
I don't know.
They had 5 years to hide it from you. We have 5 years to look for it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But the importance of controlling what people hear is, of course, very important. This is a piece from Jim Wright, who writes at Stone Kettle Station. When fascism comes to America, a piece he had on Sunday. Before mass leaders seize power to fit reality to their lies, their propaganda is marked by its extreme contempt for facts as such. For in their opinion, fact depends entirely on the power of man who can fabricate it. That's Hannah Arendt, writing in The Origins of Totalitarianism. And he focuses on Ukraine. As we in America woke to pictures and reports of horrifying war crimes committed by Vladimir Putin's forces, innocents, lined up and executed, hands tied behind their backs, the bodies of children, women, men thrown into ditches, left in streets, I would remind you of this. And he has 4 quotes he pulled out. One of these is at least from a few years ago. Why do I care what is going on in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? I'm serious. Why shouldn't I root for Russia? Which, by the way, I am. That's Tucker Carlson, Fox News.
Good guy.
This is genius. Putin declares a big portion of Ukraine. Putin declares it is independent. That's wonderful. Donald Trump, 45th president. I'd say that's pretty smart. This is more recent. He's Putin taking over a country, really a vast, vast location, a great piece of land with a lot of people just walking right in, said Donald Trump more recently. He was probably thinking of the hotels that could be built, beachfront property in Odessa, I don't need a ride. Give me ammunition. The fight is right here, but we also have neighbors to the north, this is during the Freedom Convoy, who need freedom and need to be liberated, and we need that right here at home as well. That's Lauren Boebert.
Oh, she stole that.
Right, Jim Wright says, I can go on all day, quoting various Americans who support the idea of genocide. And when you say, well, genocide, that's too strong a word. It's actually all are part of a people, a nation. And in fact, Russia's state media, even today, is publishing stuff that says Ukraine is not a nation. Don't think of it that way. They're basically breakaway Russia, and they have to be Russified. And anything less is a poor response to the Nazis who were there. And so, is it genocide? Well, you're talking about a nation. They're trying to eliminate a nation. They're trying to say Ukraine is not a country. So, yeah, it's genocide.
Oddly, they still also say that parts of Ukraine are a country. We recognize that.
Well, as independent.
Independent. So the whole thing is
totally dependent on us.
Yes.
Our definition of independent is totally dependent.
Yes.
I guess. In fact, I want to actually dig up, just give me a moment here, and I will, the actual quote, because I just think it's really important.
Good.
Okay, this state, Julia Davis News. This state media article argues that even the name of Ukraine should not be allowed to remain, and any surviving republic should be forced to rely solely on Russia for its survival. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of, is it fair to call it genocide? Yeah, it is. What the Russians say is the name Ukraine apparently cannot be retained as the title of any fully denazified state entity in a territory liberated from Nazis. The People's Republics newly created in the space free from Nazism should and will grow from the practice of economic self-government and social security, restoration, modernization. In fact, their political aspirations cannot be neutral. Expiation of guilt before Russia for treating it as an enemy can be realized only by relying on Russia in the process of restoration, revival, and development. No Marshall Plan. There can be no neutrality. The cadres and organizations that are the instrument of denazification in the newly denazified republics cannot but rely on Russia's direct military and organizational support. So they are saying Ukraine cannot exist as a nation. You can't even use the word. So again, when people use the term genocide, no, they're not just throwing it around. You look and see what happened in Bucha and other places like that. And how could they do this? Well, you know, if you think that all the Ukrainians are Nazis, then you become brutalized, you know, and think of that in terms of how people describe our southern border. And the, you know, they're not really human. They're just disease-carrying cockroaches, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The worst of it.
Well,
but that's what Russia is applying to Ukraine right now. So that's part of the story. And so anyway, going back to Jim Wright, Russia learned from the Nazi invasion of their own country. They had already committed horrifying slaughters of their own, but when the Nazis invaded Russia, it gave Stalin justification for Soviet brutality, or perhaps validation is a better word. But whatever word you use, Russia carries that idea to this day. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, well,
talk more about that after the break.
True.
It's pretty brutal stuff.
Yeah, and it's important to add that for people who are sticklers for the terminology about things like genocide or fascism or what have you, this does, in fact, ends up meeting the definition when you're in the business of trying to erase the entirety of the place.
Yeah, well, if you look it up, you know, and please do, if you look it up, it fits.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Gosh, welcome back. There's genocide happening, and I don't know. We've met the definition of it. That's true, and I know for people who are sticklers for the definition.
Well, here's the formal definition from the Oxford Dictionary: the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group. Doesn't have to be ethnic group. It could be a nation.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be all of them. It could be a large number of them. With the aim of destroying that nation or group, and here's Russia saying Ukraine cannot exist, we have to eliminate the name.
Yes.
It fits the definition.
That's why this is sort of the important the important tie-in. It now makes the aim of the campaign the erasure of this entire country. Right?
And we're going to get to, why he invaded and all of that. But here's basically what happened to lay it out. Human Rights Watch had a very widely spread piece, Ukraine Apparent War Crimes in Russia-Controlled Areas, summary executions, other grave abuses by Russian forces, evidence of mass graves, for example, shooting people of a certain age who were male, tying their hands behind their back, deliberate stuff. Mm-hmm. And so in the last 24 to 48 hours, reaction from Western Europe has been pretty intense. Here's one example. Julian Ropke It reports Germany to increase sanctions against Russia and increase military support for Ukraine after apparent Russian war crimes in Bucha and other now liberated towns, said the foreign minister. And the foreign minister, in fact, is Annalena Baerbock. And what she said is, translating it, the images from Bucha are unbearable. Putin's rampant violence is wiping out innocent families and knows no bounds. And then went on to say, those responsible for these war crimes must be held accountable. We'll tighten sanctions against Russia and will support Ukraine even more in their defense. Now, that's a reasonably typical response from Europe, and I emphasize that that doesn't mean, therefore, we will invade as NATO on the ground and support Ukraine. You could be horrified and demand reparation and say that things will now happen, and that still doesn't mean, and we're also going to go to war against Russia. So this balancing act between not wanting to start World War III with a nuclear nation and feeling like what you've done isn't enough, and even if you were on the fence about what's enough, that's going to change. That's basically what happened over the weekend. Poland is calling for specifically Germany to basically cut your gas and oil ties. That's what you need to do. Stop dithering and get off the fence. And at the same time, there's a lot of calls for war crime investigation. I'm going to pull this from the Pundit Roundup. But just as a general rule, there's two groups. Forget about Human Rights Watch. There's two groups that you don't want, two entities, I should say, that you don't want accusing you of war crimes, right? The Holocaust Museum and Germany.
Two, yes, right.
Right? If they say you're doing something wrong, Germany's here on record, that's bad for you.
Yeah, that's worse than us, they'll say.
New York Times, this is true barbarity, life and death under Russian occupation. You get the flavor. I wrote on the Pundit Roundup, documented atrocities plus ruble blackmail. Pay for oil and gas in rubles is a great way to piss off Europe and rub their nose in financing Russia's invasion, so I don't think it's going to help much.
Okay.
Britain's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says as Russian troops are forced into retreat, we're seeing increasing evidence of appalling acts by the invading forces in towns such as Irpin and Bucha. Their indiscriminate attacks must be investigated as war crimes. Again, these are calls to action which don't necessarily include, and let's have NATO, show up on Ukrainian soil. So, it's important when say, everything has changed in the last 24, 48 hours. There's been this dynamic between we don't want to start World War III and bullies need to be punched in the nose. You can't just let them do stuff. And that tension's going to continue until this is over, however it's ended. But it doesn't automatically wind up as therefore NATO's going to wind up, coming in on the side of Ukraine. If you think that means that NATO divisions are going to wind up in Ukraine, NATO arms are going to wind up in Ukraine. That's happening now, and it's going to happen even more. Yes. And the parallel course is going to be investigating how you try in absentia people who are committing war crimes. Since Russia is by default picked up the spot from the Soviet Union without having been voted in on the Security Council, in the UN, and on the Human Rights Watch committees. Right. Ukraine is suggesting that maybe they should be kicked off those committees as a first step.
It's an idea. It's something to think about, and I'm sure we're going back to the rule book and trying to figure out how you do it. How do you kick somebody off who's got a veto as a permanent member? Okay,
right. Well, you go back to the rules and process and say, well, they never should have been here in the first place. We're just correcting a mistake.
That's the only way I can think of it. But, they're very clever there. Maybe they'll come up with something different.
Samuel Romani reports breaking the EU vows to impose more sanctions on Russia following the Bucha massacre and atrocities committed by the Russian army in Kyiv liberated region. So this is a huge story. It's affecting the entire world. Not real clear how it all winds up shaking out. But there's no question that just things have changed. This is one of those inflection points, as people like to say. And it's very difficult to sit on the sidelines here And you can't act precipitously. You can't do nothing. Rather, Biden is president than Trump, given what's going on here. I think even Fox News watchers are going to get that because you can't block all of this stuff. It's just too ubiquitous.
Well, hopefully, we'll see what happens in terms of teaching people here the lesson. But
again, ripples.
Wow.
There's always ripples. Stunning, unprecedented developments in Pakistan. Madhya Afzal reports. The Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly throws out the no confidence vote against their Prime Minister. President Alvi then dissolves Parliament on Prime Minister Khan's advice. The government says new general elections will be held. Meanwhile, the Chief Justice of Pakistan takes suo motu notice of the situation.
What? Okay.
I don't know what suo motu means.
No.
But I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on the internets. So basically what happened is the Putin-leaning Prime Minister had a dispute with his pro-Western assembly, and they may be pro-Western because India is pro-Putin, and so naturally Pakistan is anti-India, and it's not clear what the politics are, but they don't agree on how to approach this, and this is part of the ripples of what happened in Ukraine with Russia. Now, suo motu is South Asian law. It's relating to an action taken by a court of its own accord without any request by the parties involved.
Oh, all right. I've never heard that, I guess, because it's South Asian. I guess we would call that sua sponte in our version of all right, interesting.
Right.
Oh,
you didn't need to ask me to do this. I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah, okay. The bench of its own accord takes some action despite not being asked to do so by the parties, but usually because
so that's a pretty extreme thing to do, which gives you an idea of the pretty extreme things that are going on in Pakistan.
Yes, I guess. Well, anytime they talk about dissolving parliament, that's worrisome sounding. Although that's a thing that they do and reconstitute it all the time in these parliamentary democracies. But it's not great for stability. But on the other hand, neither is our system, which has actual stable members of Congress saying wrong things all the time.
Well, stable is in scare quotes.
Yeah. Right. I mean, they're stuck. We're stuck with them. We're
stuck with them, stable. But as far as their mental abilities right now, their mental condition, I'm not sure they're stable.
Well, we're stuck with Russia on the UN Security Council, and that's not such a great idea either. Right.
War on the Rocks has which advertises themselves as national security for insiders by insiders, says, is Russia's invasion a case of coercive diplomacy gone wrong? I just thought this was a really, really interesting article, long article. But I like to think of it this way. Some mook knocks on your business door, let's say in New York.
Okay.
And says, nice place you got here. Be a shame if something happened to it. Doesn't have to happen. Yeah. Just give me a little insurance. I'll make sure it's a dangerous neighborhood.
Okay.
Make sure nothing happens to you.
Yeah.
And you laugh, and you shut the door in his face.
Yeah.
What is this guy going to do? He went to business school, maybe Harvard Business School. He realizes that his business model is going to fail if he doesn't burn your place down. He doesn't want to. But he has to, because if you shut the door in his face, everybody else will shut the door in his face. Right. And where does that leave him? And the analogy to Putin is pretty clear. First, Russia's demands, now that wasn't in the article, that was just me trying to interpret the article. But the guy's going to burn, he probably didn't want to, is the point. He just wanted to threaten you and you give him the money. That's the easy thing. He doesn't want to have to pay for the lighter fluid, go through the work of taking the trouble of burning the house. That puts him at risk, all that stuff. What he wants to do is threaten you, you get scared, and you give him all your money. It's as simple as that. Anything else that happens, it went wrong. Even though it's pretty clear that's what he's going to do.
Right. I mean, it has to be contemplated.
But it's not his first choice. That's plan B. Plan A is I threaten you, you give me the money.
Right. And ideally, you just give me the money. I don't even have to get up out of bed and threaten you.
Yeah, exactly. If it worked even better, you would just send it to me before I even got there.
Yeah, right. Just throw money out the door as I approach.
Right. Anything else is a failure.
In fact, just mail it to me.
I can't put the business model at risk.
Right.
So I have no choice. I have to burn your place down.
Not personal.
Nothing
just
personal,
business.
buddy. It's business.
Yeah. That's what they mean by that, which, doesn't help you.
As Tom Hagen said.
Yes.
Just business, nothing
he
personal.
He didn't do those things.
With
I don't know who did.
The article says, first, Russia's demands were fairly clear and consistent, but they were not particularly realistic, nor were they attached to a defined deadline. Coercive diplomacy is inherently difficult, even when the coercer has clear advantages and relatively modest demands. Unconditional surrender, disarmament, territorial concessions, regime change, they are all particularly onerous demands, especially against a well-armed opponent like Ukraine.
Yes.
But Putin's repeated efforts to deny Ukraine's nationhood, and it comes up again here, we're talking genocide here, showed him to be prejudiced and unreasonable, and made it exceedingly difficult to take any diplomatic overtures to Ukraine seriously, from his point of view.
Okay.
If he doesn't think it's a nation, and he doesn't think these are real people, then how is he supposed to have a one-on-one meeting with Zelensky?
I guess if there's...
And raise him to the level
real.
of nationhood, one-on-one meeting between leaders of nations, if he doesn't believe that Ukraine is a nation. That's one of the reasons why negotiations are never going to happen.
Yeah.
At least until he has to. His demands that U.S. nuclear weapons be removed from Europe and all NATO forces be pulled out of Eastern Europe were also received as unserious and were bound to be rejected.
That was the big December something.
So that's the West slamming the door in Putin's face and saying, yeah, right, Mook, not happening.
Right.
So what happens next? You can predict it, is the point.
It's a tracksuit. It comes back.
It's a plan B, but not the plan B he wanted. With respect to a Russian deadline, the conclusion of the planned exercises in Belarus and the end of the Winter Olympics arguably provided a tacit deadline, to the point that many open-source intelligence analysts had identified it as the time period of concern, which is roughly within the time that Russia actually invaded. Though intelligence indicated the possibility of a Russian invasion as early as mid-November, the first clear indication of the political decision to invade Ukraine came in late December, soon after the public rejection of Russia's demands and negotiations with the U.S. But Russian officials never issued an overt threat or provided a concrete deadline, except perhaps when Putin made a cryptic reference to retaliatory military technical measures. Hey, I didn't say I was going to burn his place down. I just said it'd be a shame if something happened.
Yeah, it'd be a shame if something technical happened.
Right?
Yeah. Kinetic
and Russia
actions.
then badly underestimated Ukraine's resolve to fight rather than make any territorial or political concessions, as well as NATO's resolve to preserve its open door policy, which is to say maybe Ukraine at some point could get in later because other Eastern European countries had. Not necessarily part of Russia proper in Putin's mind, but nonetheless part of the Soviet Union. Additionally, one or more parties may have miscalculated Russia's resolve, either ignoring the real danger of invasion or concluding a show of force as a bluff. But while Putin's non-starter demands were clearly unacceptable from the standpoint of the U.S. and NATO, that doesn't necessarily mean they were put forward in bad faith. Instead, they likely reflected Russia's well-known resentment about past NATO expansion. In other words, Russia meant it. That's what they wanted. They weren't just bluffing. They weren't going to get it, but that's what they wanted. And now that you say, well, you can't have what you wanted, that's stupid, then they say, well, what do you expect me to do now? I have to do something. And in the end, to make the long article short, that's basically what happened. So Putin was sort of backed into a corner and felt like he had to invade.
I guess so. I mean, I don't think that's a
terrible
bad
decision.
excuse, sir.
It's a terrible decision.
Yes.
And it's not a justification. It's an explanation of how did we get here.
Yeah. Well, I recall some time ago reading, I guess back in December, reading about from the Russian viewpoint, they had issued this ultimatum, and we were likely going to, reject it to the extent that we had anything to do with it, really. But the removal of nuclear weapons from Europe, certainly, removal of NATO troops, refusing to admit certain nations, that was all put directly to us. But then, in addition, demands directly on Ukraine. But yeah, my recollection is that in late December, our version of the story was, has anybody heard this? Because in Russia, they're saying the people should be preparing for possible nuclear war with the United States over this, and the rest of us here have heard nothing about this. But, well, ultimatums were issued, and this was, I guess, us slamming the door in their face and saying, no, this is stupid. And we were right. Those are terrible demands and we shouldn't entertain them. But, yeah, I guess that's one explanation for it. Unfortunately, what we should be doing is saying, maybe I'm in the wrong line of work and I shouldn't be doing this as a business model. But that's not going to occur to somebody like that.
So Europe is trying to turn away from Russian oil and gas. Europe wants 50 billion cubic meters of additional natural gas. Supplies are tight, says the New York Times. Prices will rise, and other regions might have to do with less. And we would love to send liquefied natural gas. That's how you transport it. But we don't have the facilities for it.
Yes. If you're trying
we will
to
in a year or two.
Turn Lev Parnas into a good guy now because now he's mad at Trump and wants to tell on him. That was his original plan before the rest of the stuff and helping him actually do the opposite and turn Ukraine over to Russia. Before he was working on that, he was working on ways to ship LNG over there. And, that didn't work out. So now that there's a huge demand for it, he's crying. I could have been an oligarch. I was so close.
Right. It's probably easier and cheaper to ship it by pipeline, but if you can't do it by pipeline, like from the U.S. over to Europe, then you do liquid natural gas tankers and that sort of thing.
Yep. Well, maybe the Norwegians will cash in. They've got a huge amount of it.
Right. So anyway, that's the background for all of this. There's no question that the discoveries, the reports, however you want to call it, what Russia was, and probably is ongoing doing in Ukraine in regard to the civilian population is roiling everything, diplomacy, the markets, everything else. And so that's really the big story. The other things that are happening in the Senate also shouldn't be forgotten. There's two things that are worth mentioning. One is there's still discussions, even as we speak, because the Senate is working on emergency coronavirus response package as the numbers start to tick up here in the U.S. They're talking about a push for global vaccination, but it's unclear whether that kind of move could gain approval from either chamber of Congress right now. But that is something to keep an eye on. The other thing is that today, I believe, will be the vote in the Judiciary Committee, which will probably be 11-11, to approve Judge Jackson's move to the floor for a full vote. And I don't fully understand the process by which an 11-11 vote gets to the floor, but if Democrats wanted to, it will.
Yes. It's contemplated that tie votes would move nominations to the floor. I guess they just won't come with a specific recommendation. But because they knew that the committee would be tied and that agreeing to any other rules other than a tie vote still works, they had to. I don't know. They had to agree. And they managed to get. I guess you run roughshod over the other side by saying, all right, this is going to be the rule, and the vice president will come and hit you with the gavel if you don't believe it. But, rather than have that happen, why don't you just admit that she will hit you over the head? Just give her the money, essentially, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's the rule. Okay. So an 11-11 moves the nomination to the floor. It just doesn't. It means it doesn't come with a glowing report that says the committee loves her.
Yeah. What Mitt Romney will do is still a mystery. Susan Collins is a yes. I'm not sure Murkowski is committed. Everybody else is saying she's wonderful, she's terrific, but I can't vote for her because I don't like her judicial philosophy, which is sort of a new way of saying, first of all, she's a Democrat.
Right.
She happens to be a black woman, which is wonderful, and that means nothing to me because basically she's a Democrat.
We definitely need that on the Supreme Court, just not this one. And just as we definitely need a woman as president, just not this one. It's always this one that's the problem.
Just not this Supreme Court and just not this country is what
that's
they're
what
saying.
That's right. You can do fantastic. You know what? Ukraine needs a Supreme Court.
Right.
Go there.
The Supreme Court needs somebody like her, just not this Supreme Court.
Right.
Put her on some other Supreme
anyone. I don't know. Right. Yes.
Where she'd be eminently qualified, just not this one.
Yep.
So Aaron Blake has an interesting piece in the Washington Post about all of that. Americans strongly disapprove of GOP pushback on Ketanji Brown Jackson. Republicans pledged to treat Jackson better than Democrats treated Kavanaugh. Americans didn't see it that way. Reviews of how Republicans approached Jackson's hearings and seemingly her record on child pornography cases, the main line of attack. Remember, that's a QAnon thing.
Right.
And we talked about that. The reason they keep harping on that is it makes men nervous, and they think it's a get out the vote for Republicans. But the main line of attack there and reactions to it are quite poor. Just 27% of Americans approve of their approach compared to 52% who disapprove. That's a 25-point gap. That compares to the 20-point gap in the CNN poll of Democrats for Kavanaugh. Across both cases, independents viewed the opposition party's conduct similarly. On Kavanaugh, they disapproved of Democrats 58-30, and with Jackson, they disapprove of Republicans 54-25. But if there's a difference between the two confirmations, it's that neither side came out of the Kavanaugh hearings with good reviews. But when it comes to Jackson, Democrats earned more positive reviews than negative ones. So this isn't a matter of people simply disliking all politicians. And that's a comment that goes to the, Democrats weren't forceful enough in defending her. Actually, they did great. And people liked it.
Well,
independents liked it.
Yes, if that helps. I mean,
right? They like Cory Booker's approach. They don't like you have to take your opposition by the throat because it makes me feel better. That's not a winning play in politics. The winning play in politics is get most of the people to like it, not to get you to like it.
That's
a very hard lesson for people to understand.
Yeah, I don't know how much we've tested the other method, but apparently people say they don't want to see it tested. So, if you
again, the comparison to Democrats handling Kavanaugh is instructive. 26% of the opposition party disapproved of their own side's handling.
20, okay.
Right, approval was significantly higher, 67%. So inter-party reviews are on net more negative for the GOP's handling of Jackson than they were for Democrats' handling of Kavanaugh. More Republicans support Jackson than Democrats did Kavanaugh.
Well, that's
all in all, it doesn't appear the American public views Republicans as having raised the level of discourse when it comes to Jackson's hearings.
Yeah. Well,
so that's good.
There's another. I mean, the other curveball, I guess, is there's you can grade it on the rhetoric, true, but then, there were credible accusations of pretty serious crimes against one and not against the other. So the angry reaction of the other side trying
there
to
are
put
reasons.
it onto them. Yeah.
That was the Lindsey Graham nonsense.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? How dare you expect Judge Jackson to get reasonably positive reports from this committee when you wouldn't give that to Kavanaugh?
Well, yeah.
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 Kavanaugh was accused of something pretty bad. And you're trying to make the analogy? Well, I'll accuse her of something pretty bad. Going easy on child pornography. How do you like them apples? They're not apples to apples.
Yeah, that didn't happen, and you're wrong about what it meant. But
I'm just going to make a lot of noise, and nobody really understand the difference. And
that's true.
Well, actually, the public does understand the difference, and no, it didn't work.
Well, they're right about it for their own side. Although they got, as you say, they got worse reviews from their own side than Democrats got.
Probably because they realized it wasn't effective.
Yeah, I mean,
not because they didn't like the Republicans being mean, but it's like you picked the line of questioning that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I'm already a Republican, and it makes me uncomfortable. And besides, it's icky, and besides, I don't think it's effective. So pick something better next time. I don't like what you did.
Well, I'm sure they'll get that message loud and clear and totally do a thing with it. They'll do an autopsy like at the RNC.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
yeah,
that's the news roundup for the weekend.
All right.
UConn lost, I'm sorry to say, but South Carolina has a really awesome, dominant team.
Okay.
And it's amazing we got as far as we did. Oh, I also heard that there was a men's basketball game.
Is there? I will check that out. I'm certain that they will probably throw that ball right in the net and everything. What did Ted Cruz say that time? Something about throwing it through the hoop or something, but just a different way. You remember that was about 2 years ago.
I try to pay as little attention to Ted Cruz as I possibly can.
I try too. It goes in one ear.
Because I recoil. It makes me feel icky. Yeah. It makes me want to vote Democratic.
All right. Well, then it's working. It's great. But he had some sort of basketball comment, and it was just like the equivalent of an alien commenting on it. Throw the spheroid through the, Kang and Kodan.
Here's a quick update from the New York Times.
Yes,
just updated.
please.
The country's top court in Pakistan met Monday to decide whether lawmakers could hold a no-confidence vote over Prime Minister Imran Khan.
The judge gets to decide
that's interesting.
Yeah,
we'll see how that
I don't
develops.
know where that comes from, if that's uniquely Pakistani or if that's something, a holdover from the British system or what. I mean, anybody recognize that? You can tell us about it. So the judge decides whether or not they can have a no-confidence vote. That's weird. All right, well, there's a lot of weird goings-on with judges these days. We hope things go smoothly in committee today, and we barely understand the process by which they're working. But that gives me an idea for something to cover in the top of the next segment about some of our own judges getting caught up in weird situations here in the United States, having to do with redistricting, still battling that out in Ohio, where judges of the justices, I guess they call them there too, of the Supreme Court keep ordering the redistricting people to come back to them with maps as required by the state constitution, which everyone loves in that state because they're such patriots, but they keep refusing to do it. And as a result, they're getting themselves in trouble. But instead, the Republicans in the state legislature there say, well, maybe the fix is impeach these justices who keep ordering us to do stuff. And they're beginning to roll that out as a solution, which is quite remarkable. Where I guess you got to speak to these judges in Pakistan who take no guff from anyone. No, there's just a mail out for it. All right. Well, thank you, Greg, and we'll see you again on Wednesday. The world will probably only have changed a tiny bit by then, so maybe a short update.
Let's hope so. Unfortunately, our bond won in Hungary, but that's too bad.
Well, I'm sure it was a close vote. All those mail-in ballots probably ruined it. And it's full of fraud, and the election was
one
stolen.
party controls the election machinery, communications, the courts, the schools,
right.
Supermajority in the legislature. The opposition is not going to do well.
And that's why Donald Trump is so excited about bringing you the new Republican slate. Don't you realize that could happen here, too, if we just work hard enough to cheat hard enough? We, too, can win every single election, and those that we don't will just kill everybody who voted the other way. So, excellent. Thank you, Greg. It's a great model. Democracy's a little better, though. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see. What do we have set aside here for further consideration? Oh, yes, right. Did I put away the Ohio story? At any rate, I've gotten that out on the record here, but we do need to make a visit to Ohio once this straightens itself out, or as it further spins out of control. But yeah, that's the lengths to which they're willing to go there. I mean, it's a classic example, that storyline. I should see if if we run across it, we'll read it. But do have to make a note to catch up on it. But it's a classic example of the way Republicans tend to respond to these things. And I don't know. I'm not certain whether the fact that I anticipate some things like that, or sometimes even suggest things like that for Democrats, even though I know they won't do it. It's a fun exercise in fantasy league politics to suggest that these things are possible to Democrats, knowing that they're never going to do anything like this. But Republicans actually would, and they will, and they are doing these things. But I sometimes wonder about stuff like that. Like, okay, you have a constitutional amendment for the state that says you got to redistrict fairly and try and reflect the statewide outcome of statewide elections in your redistricting, and if it's 55-45 for one party or another, then the redistricting both for the state legislature and for Congress should look likely to come out the same way. If you're able to determine which districts are going to be leaning Republican and which will be leaning Democratic, it should be about 50. If the statewide vote is 55-45 for Republicans, so should the legislature be 55-45. So should the congressional representation be 55-45. And, of course, they're doing everything they can to avoid that. But it's constitutional. So, I mean, there's two different roads to getting to the cheating result you want, and one is putting forward a slanted redistricting plan and having judges from your side simply say, yes, we interpret the Constitution as having, the provisions have been met here by this map that's 85-15 Republican. How so? It doesn't make any sense. The outcome of elections statewide is 55-45. How can you approve an 85-15 map? And the answer is we can, because we're the ultimate arbiters of what goes here in Ohio with respect to how the Constitution works. Although, of course, there is the United States Supreme Court can, in fact, step in and say, under certain circumstances, you guys aren't actually all that smart when it comes to interpreting your own Constitution. We'll do that for you, usually by saying it conflicts with the federal Constitution, and that will have to trump you in our system. But if, on the other hand, you're able to count on Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court to say, that looks fine to me, Ohio Supreme Court. And after all, we're all about small government. We don't want to intervene in your interpretation of your Constitution, and they'll let it lie. But somehow somebody threw them a curveball there at the Ohio State level Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is like, nope, we actually are taking the Constitution seriously and taking the language seriously. So the only other option available to them is, what if we just said you're not the Supreme Court anymore? That will take some doing, and I don't know exactly what the Ohio Constitution says about impeachment of Supreme Court justices, and I imagine if it, and in many of these things, the state constitutions will follow the federal model and say, all right, well, it will require 2/3, let's say, of the state Senate to agree. And I don't know what the numbers are in the Ohio Senate, but they may have it. And they certainly are trying everything they can to get it by gerrymandering all the districts. I mean, that was one of the points. And this is why they're willing to take this up, right? What was the point of gerrymandering all of these seats to give ourselves an unfair partisan advantage in the state legislature if we aren't going to use it? Which is something we keep asking Democrats occasionally to try and do. Why strive to win the majority if you won't use the majority? Well, we use it for different things, like electing congressional leadership so that we can move through presidential nominations and then have messaging votes on things, whatever. Okay, so without getting too far down that road for criticism, Republicans believe there's a reason they have been designing these cheat codes for winning supermajorities, and we'll see whether they try and carry through with it and whether they have the votes to do it. At this point, I guess if I weren't on the air, I would be looking up the partisan breakdown of the Ohio state legislature to see whether or not impeachment of state Supreme Court justices is a realistic possibility, and that may be their way out in all this. It's just interesting, right? Like I say, classic example of them just saying, we'll just do the constitutional hardball. We'll change the rules of the game, or at least the conditions on the ground, if not the rules of the game. The rules are that what the Supreme Court says goes, but we can make the Supreme Court go. So let's try doing that and appointing a Supreme Court that will say the opposite. Now, whether you can do that in time for an election, I don't know. But maybe they figure as long as the Supreme Court isn't in a position to tell them no before the election, they can just have the election based on the lines that they want. But it's a sort of extreme response that you could never get Democrats to agree to. Maybe for good reason. I don't know. Theoretically, we don't really want that to be the kind of thing that goes on. It's troublesome, but sometimes you're going to have to push back. Otherwise, that guy will come to your door and that bad thing will happen to your home. All right, let's see. By the way of comments and suggestions from others listening here, Rebecca Romans remembers the Ted Cruz thing, referring to throwing the ball through the basketball ring. Yes, that's right. That's what it was. I mean, hoop is what they call it. So, but still, it's it's an awkward. There's only certain ways to actually use that term and still sound like you know what you're talking about. And I don't know what they are. But basketball ring done by no one. That's definitely it. All right. Thank you very much. Let's see. By the way, our favorite South Carolina fan, the left-leaning cock, fan of the Gamecocks of South Carolina, says to Greg, thanks for the kind words for our Gamecocks women's basketball team. UConn is the model for success, and I hope we get many years of these two dynasties clashing. And I think probably other people think I would like to see some wider base of frequent and meaningful competition at the upper levels of college women's basketball. And I guess that would be good for everyone, but not for fans of the two teams. But it's nice. I don't know. It's nice to have nice chatter about the women's basketball program and tournament going on, and we can always count on Greg injecting that towards the end when everybody's trying to, while everyone else is focusing on the men's side, and it's worth bringing up. And by the way, have we heard anything about the women's player, the basketball player detained by the Russians lately? Again, I never did actually keep up on the story, but I don't believe I've seen any new developments on that either, which I guess means she's still stuck there. Even though I also thought, because I hadn't seen any new developments, that Clarence Thomas might still be in the hospital. He's not. He's out and working remotely, sort of from home, and I believe even actually participating in deliberations remotely as well. All right. Let's see. Other comments to catch up with here. Ricky, our friend Ricky, the Canuckistani, that is to say, from Canada, has these comments to say, I wish, let's see, everyone would stop talking about TFG and let him fade into obscurity. That would be nice. I wish, but we always have that constant tension of, look at this outrageous thing, or watch out, he's going to kill us all. And, you don't want to let that go unmonitored, per se. But he is getting a lot less attention. There really was very little actual coverage, comparatively speaking, of the rally. I only found out after the fact that it happened, and that's sort of a new development. They used to hype those things for days ahead of time. So that's good news. What else does she comment here? Although we are still waiting for Sean Hannity to be waterboarded for charity. That's true. It's sometimes a long wait. And then I guess on the questions of parliamentary dissolution, let's see, we dissolve parliament all the time. It's how we start new elections. That's the way the parliamentary system, generally speaking, goes. It's just it strikes a different tone. Like here in the United States, we don't dissolve Congress in the middle. So that would be like a very worrisome, destabilizing sort of thing here. And, just trying to remind everybody, it's not necessarily destabilizing in these parliamentary democracies, although it is something that sometimes people complain about, changing governments and changing the composition of government so frequently. And some parliamentary democracies handle it very well, and some don't, and that's to be expected. And the Canadians and British appear to be able to do it, well, I don't know. I wonder whether it's ethnocentric. It must be, because everything's ethnocentric. To say they handle these dissolutions pretty well because they're explainable and we can understand the positions of the politicians because they're speaking in English and it makes sense to us. Whereas these countries where all the positions have to be translated and maybe the translation isn't all that good. I mean, is there anything inherently destabilizing or less stable, for instance, than about the way the Italians handle the dissolutions of their parliaments and turning over government after government, or the French used to, or is it just, well, they speak a funny gibberish language and we don't understand them, or they're culturally different from us and they're, I wonder whether that has anything to do with it, the fact that we can't just simply monitor the news ourselves and understand it. All right, well, let's see. We'll see what other comments come our way, although I didn't understand this one, Ricky. You threw this one in the middle. I didn't realize that I needed to be liberated. I didn't know that you did either, but what was it? I don't know. Do you? Were we kidding? Did you need to be liberated? I don't remember what that was a reference to. But if you feel like clearing that up, we'll maybe address it. But if you're clear on it, we're good to go. I don't necessarily have to understand. Sometimes I find these comments 20 minutes after, 40 minutes after the fact, and I can't remember what people were talking about. But I only need to follow up when somebody says, that was horrible, don't ever do that again. Oh, what was it? Or that was great. Although those I don't follow up on. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I don't remember what it was. All right. Back to the news. I did mention to you that the unfortunate news of Lisa McClain, the quote-unquote crazy lady, who at the Michigan rally for Trump said that Trump was the one that killed Osama bin Laden. There's a news report on that. Just letting you know. Actual member of Congress. That's sad all by itself. The story, such as it is, coming from Business Insider. The headline is very long, but it tells you all the things that we said before, including, oh, look at that. In the headline, it makes that same joke/diss of Trump. The whole long headline, GOP Representative McClain falsely claimed that Trump caught Osama bin Laden. The al-Qaeda leader was killed during the first Obama administration when Trump was still hosting a game show. That's actually the headline at Business Insider on a piece written by Catherine, Tangelakis Lippert. I think I got that right. And she's never really registered with me, this Representative Lisa McClain. She's in her first term. That will have something to do with it. She's just not made a name for herself. So now I guess she thought, well, I might as well make a name for myself. I'll be remembered as the person who did this dumb thing, but that's gold mine in the Republican ranks. There's no cost whatsoever to doing something like this, and it's a ticket to instant notoriety. And the bad kind of notoriety just doesn't sink you with Republicans. All right, so bullet points up top, but we'll just go down below and read the story. Michigan Congresswoman Lisa McClain falsely claimed during a Saturday campaign rally that Osama bin Laden had been caught by the Trump administration. Her line, well, President Trump was in office. We didn't have a war, and I think he made 3 peace treaties, McClain said during her speech. Caught Osama bin Laden, and Soleimani al-Baghdadi. That part, I think, is actually the case. And this president is weak. And I'll tell you, weakness breeds aggression. We need strength. Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, a leader of ISIS, were both killed during military operations completed during the Trump administration. The 2011 raid that killed bin Laden, however, was conducted during President Barack Obama's first term in office. Not second, but first. Joe Biden was serving as vice president at the time. Trump was hosting The Apprentice, a reality game show on NBC. During her remarks, McClain also said unemployment is at a 40-year high, while there is, quote, a labor shortage. Well, a little bit backwards there. The current unemployment rate is 3.8%, down from a record of 14.7% during the height of the pandemic, and lower than it has been for most of the last 20 years. McClain's office did not immediately respond to insiders' request for comment, because what are you going to say? Unemployment is at a 40-year high. Actually, 40-year low. Labor shortage, yes, but that's probably due more to your gigantic wall project than anything else. And what I can tell you beyond that, dummy of the day. Really, just unbelievable. Okay, and about that rally, The Guardian was covering it, and I know Ricky doesn't want to hear very much about it. That's probably true, but maybe we'll just note in passing this, again, documentary evidence of my anecdote that I passed on about why Trump is doing these rallies. Sam Levine reporting for The Guardian under the title of "We Need to Work These Polls. Trump Stumps for Candidates Who Support the Big Lie." Well, maybe I'll read all the way through it because there's a more important story. Not just that he was doing this rally, but why he's doing the rallies. Trump praises little-known Republican Matthew DePerno and Christina Caramo, both of whom falsely claimed the 2020 election was a fraud and are now seeking key Michigan offices. Let's find out which ones and why. 8 hours. It's not going to take 8 hours to read this, but 8 hours before Donald Trump took the stage in the Detroit suburbs on Saturday, an army of canvassers darted along the line of people snaking outside the hulking sports complex where supporters of the former president were waiting to get in. And they're asking him questions. You guys think we're going to have a fair election? One canvasser asked Marco Bragion, Braggion, Bragion, 26, and Christian Howard, 25, who was, I would say were, probably, standing in a cowboy hat and jean jacket. We need to be able to work these polls to keep eyes on what's going on. It was an exchange that underscored how Republicans, stewing in doubts about the 2020 election, are organizing to take control of the machinery of elections, how ballots are cast and counted. Links to the ProPublica story about this. Let me see if I can figure out which one it is. Back in September of 2021, heeding Steve Bannon's call, election deniers organized to seize control of the GOP and reshape America's elections. Yes, I believe we noted that at the time. All right. But yes, the Republicans are organizing to take control of the machinery of elections. And when Trump took the stage Saturday evening, his first visit to Michigan since 2020, that's what he was focused on too. He was there to campaign for two little-known candidates who are seeking offices that wield significant power over voting rules in Michigan, one of the most important battleground states in the presidential election. Trump was stumping for Matthew DePerno, who is seeking the GOP nomination for Attorney General, and Christina Caramo, a Republican running to be Michigan's Secretary of State, the state's chief election official. Both are seeking to earn Republican nominations at the party convention in the state this month. Neither has any prior political experience, and their political rise stems almost entirely from their efforts to spread misinformation about the 2020 election. Joe Biden defeated Trump in the state by just over 154,000 votes. It wasn't really actually close in Michigan, but, this is what they're doing anyway. And Trump's efforts to throw out the election is something they're still working to try to do and try to support. If Caramo and DePerno were elected this fall, it would place two Trump allies in key positions from which they could potentially do what he could not in 2020, overturn an election result. Remember, this is not just about 2022. This is about making sure Michigan is not, as he says, not rigged and stolen in 2024. Which is to say, of course, whenever you're interpreting a Trump statement, it's the opposite. This is about making sure that Michigan is rigged and is stolen in 2024. But for him, that's all. That's what Trump said in, as they report here, a meandering hour and 45-minute speech in which he repeatedly insisted, falsely, that he had won Michigan in 2020. I have to be honest. Oh, no, you don't. You don't have to, that's for sure. I have to be honest. I don't do this often for state people. This is so important. What happened in Michigan, it's a disgrace. I lost by 154,000 votes. Caramo is a part-time community college professor who became a celebrity in Republican circles after claiming she witnessed fraud on election night while observing ballots being counted in Detroit. Those claims have been debunked, but she has nonetheless catapulted to the front of the Republican field in the Secretary of State race. She joined an unsuccessful Michigan's 2020 election an unsuccessful Michigan's 2020 election from being certified and sought to intervene in an unsuccessful effort at the U.S. Supreme Court seeking to overturn election results in key swing states. I'm not certain. She joined maybe an unsuccessful lawsuit about Michigan's 2020 election. All right, that could have made sense, but that's missing from the sentence. She has called public schools government indoctrination camps. That would have nothing to do with the Secretary of State's job. What the hell? And suggested those who attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6th were Antifa. And by the way, just to connect things to the current atrocities in Ukraine, while they were texting around those, unfortunately, having to prove to the world that these things were happening, pictures of the people who had been executed by the Russians with their hands tied behind their back. Don't leave out in your thinking and in your recollection of what happened on January 6th that the fact is that a lot of the people who participated in the insurrection at least say, even if they don't really mean it, they at least say for public consumption that that's how they wish January 6th had ended here in the United States, with Democrats and Democratic elected officials, and Mike Pence too, with their hands tied behind their back and executed. Don't forget that we're not that far away from what's happening, and what's weird is the continuing support for the Russians who are doing all these political executions by the Republicans. Like they will one day ask for arms and backing in their civil war against the duly elected government of the United States, and maybe they'll get it from Russia. You need to support us in our war in Ukraine, and we'll support you in your war in the United States when the day comes. Just think about that. Political union with Russia to own the globalists. She electrified the crowd packed into the AstroTurf inside Michigan's Stars Sports Center. She's talking about, what's her name? Caramo here, Christina Caramo. Electrifying the crowd packed into this, Michigan Stars Sports Center. Okay. On Saturday night, calling Jocelyn Benson, a Democrat currently serving as Secretary of State, an authoritarian leftist who treats the people of Michigan like the unwashed masses. There's an army of people across our state who are fighting back, little MAGA warriors, and we're getting the job done, she said, using the acronym for Trump's slogan, Make America Great Again. Speaking to reporters earlier this week, Benson said Michigan was ground zero in the battle for American democracy. She said Trump was seeking to put loyalists in power who might succumb to future requests to undo elections. That's just true. We've also been fighting election deniers, some of whom now want to take over statewide offices so they can potentially be in a position to block or undo or fail to certify election results that they disagree with in the future. That is simply what's at stake this fall, she said. She's right, and it's exciting almost no one, and I don't know why. DePerno rose to prominence last year as he spread false allegations of fraud in Antrim County in northern Michigan, where a clerk made a mistake on election night and posted incorrect numbers that initially showed Biden leading. DePerno led a lawsuit against the county and spread incorrect information suggesting votes could have been switched. A government review and a separate GOP-led investigation of the incident found no evidence of fraud and was unsparing in its criticism of DePerno, but it's done no good. No longer will we allow the elites in this country to control our elections and to control us, DePerno said on Saturday. He has pledged to arrest Benson and Dana Nessel, the current Democratic Attorney General. So they'll both be arrested, despite the fact that if we arrest Donald Trump, that will be horribly destabilizing, and so we shouldn't do it. Remember, that's what's being urged at the upper levels. We can't do that. We don't. It's Banana Republic stuff. Republicans will do it when they get back in, but, what can we do? They're the ones who'll turn us into a banana republic, not us. Well, not if we get rid of them first, but okay. Outside of the rally, a soundtrack of songs that have become staples of Trump rallies, Elton John's Tiny Dancer among them. I cannot figure out the alpha male angle on that one. Blasted while some people played cornhole, and they mean the beanbag game, and it's uncomfortable whenever that comes up. Mike Lindell, the MyPillow CEO, got a thunderous round of applause when he briefly appeared, so he just goes around, like Trump, goes around collecting applause wherever. I don't know, I guess the pillow factory runs itself at this point. The most prominent canvassers were those seeking to get rallygoers to sign a petition for a ballot measure to, quote, decertify the results of the 2020 election in Michigan, something that is not legally possible. But who cares? They're just gathering the names and addresses for a mailing list anyway. Organizers hope to get 10,000 signatures at Trump's rally on Saturday, said Janice Daniels, a former local mayor involved in the effort. That's sad and scary, too. Who was collecting signatures on Saturday. She said she was unmoved by widespread legal agreement that the 2020 election cannot be undone and several reviews in Michigan that have affirmed the result of the 2020 election. Well, that's what the enemies say, she says. They want to discourage you from doing what is right and what is good and what is possible, she said. Extraordinary problems require extraordinary solutions. We're in an extraordinary environment where we had a coup d'etat to take over our entire government, which is amazing given that there's a videotaped coup d'etat that's attempted on January 6th, and it's you guys. But, I guess there's no convincing crazy. But there's documenting it and letting you know how close to the edge we are. But some people at the rally acknowledged that decertifying the election wasn't really a possibility. I don't think it's possible, but it so should have been done. It's a done deal. What does that even mean? Said Diane Zeckmeister, 67. Zeckmeister said she didn't follow election administration particularly closely in 2020 when things went sideways.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Shall we continue? Let's read a little bit more of what the coverage in The Guardian about how nutty these folks are, just to make you afraid and worried. I don't know whether Diane Zeckmeister is anybody in particular, or whether she's the woman that gets interviewed later by one of the weird right-wing fake-ish networks. I say to distinguish them from fake news. I mean, that's what they broadcast. But these, pop-up right-wing networks that now these days, you film something on any camera, whether a phone camera or an actual camera, if you have the money for it, and then upload it to your YouTube channel, and it looks like you're a news network. That was, one of the problems with launching that ability was it gave people greater opportunity, a wider range of crazy people, a greater opportunity to broadcast things that would look like news to people who were willing to accept it as news. So even if you stomp out Fox, there'll still be these pop-up things. This one is from RSBN, which I don't even know what it is. But on Instagram, they're RSBN, and the N is for network. RSB Network. I don't know. I should look that up. But they haven't appeared in the story yet. It's another one. Right Side Broadcasting. There we are. I wonder whether I can get a Wikipedia article on them and find out which, millionaire Republican is financing that. A media company founded by Joe Seals in 2015, best known for their live stream coverage of Trump rallies. So that's the business they're in. Anyway, we'll jump back to that in a second. Let's read the rest of the Guardian article. We just read the nonsensical comments. That's what made me think of this other video clip that was circulating yesterday. Nonsensical comments of this is the sane woman, right? Some people at the rally acknowledged that decertifying the election wasn't really a possibility. Let's talk to somebody level-headed. And she says, I don't think that's possible, but it so should have been done. Okay, I understand that part. Then she says, it's a done deal. Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't think it's possible. But not only is it possible, it's done. It's guaranteed. We're definitely doing it. Okay, you're not, making any sense. Oh, well. Okay, then I guess I won't give this interview. I mean, that doesn't stop them. All right, well, some people at the rally said they had not heard of Caramo and DePerno before, or both. Trump endorsed them. That got my attention, so I'm here to see that, Zechmeister said. All right. Howard said he had learned about Karamo on Saturday, or Karamo. I'm not certain how she pronounces it. It sounds like she's supporting a lot of the stuff I support, so I'd be happy to have him support her. All right. A friend who attended with her, Carol Fisher, 68, said nothing could persuade her that the results of the 2020 election were accurate. I will never believe that, she says. Several polls since the 2020 elections have shown that many Republicans continue to believe Trump won. Greg Taylor, 38, also was in line early to get into the rally to ensure he would get a spot inside. I don't think it was any danger. Even after state officials and legislative Republicans in Michigan have put out several audits and reports debunking conspiracies in Michigan, Taylor couldn't think of anything that would persuade him the results of the election were accurate. Not with what I've seen. I just can't see that, he said. The only way that we could know is, I guess, through an audit. I guess. But who knows about the audit? Well, of course, they've had their audits, and that's the point. They do the audit, and they say, no, it's not true. We've audited the results, and the results are accurate. The things you heard are untrue. Well, I want an audit that says that the things I say are true. Well, that's not an audit. That's just you saying you want something. Well, then let's have that. Okay. Tyler Griffin, he makes one more comment. Who knows about the audit? It's so hard to trust anybody. I don't trust either side, he said. And of course, if he were to count and do so honestly, let's say he was interested in doing so honestly, and came to the conclusion that, you know what, I was wrong. It turns out the real results are as reported. None of the other people who agree with him here, standing by his side and nodding and saying, yeah, that's how I feel, would say it. They'd say he must have been gotten to. So, there's no convincing him. Tyler Griffin, who was waiting in line wearing an oversized red cowboy hat, also said nothing could persuade him to accept the 2020 results. I looked at all the numbers, and it doesn't add up. Not everyone at the rally was enthusiastic about Trump's continued focus on elections. Howard, the early rally-goer who was approached about being an election worker, said he hoped Trump would leave the 2020 election in the past. I hope he kind of lets it go, he said. I know he's not going to, but I hope he does. Well, that's just terrific. Anyway, so I mentioned also widely in circulation was this video clip from Right Side Broadcasting Network. Is that right? Do I have the name right? Right Side? Yeah, Broadcasting Network. I don't know who the reporter is, but it doesn't much matter. She just stands there and, points the microphone. So what sort of craziness are we talking about? This is a longish clip, 1 minute and 29 seconds. I don't know if we need it all, but random rally goer being asked questions about the 2020 election and how it went, comes up with a new version of the theory of the election being stolen that I hadn't heard before, or involvement of entities that I had not heard there were dummies stupid enough to believe were in fact involved in this stuff, but they have tremendous capacity for coming up with new dumb crap, and here's some of that dumb crap. Let's see. Please play.
The election, I believe, was stolen, but we know that Space Force has it all. Trump has all the information.
All right, there we go. We just have to pause it just for a second. Space Force is a new entrant in all of this. Space Force has all the information. And I guess one of the reasons that you're not hearing all the information is that, well, Space Force has it, and there's 4 people at the moment, I think, in Space Force, and they can't tell people fast enough. On the other hand, Trump has all the information, and he won't actually show it to anybody either. He talks about all the information that he's got and how if you look at the information, it's definitely all there. But then I don't know. Doesn't seem to be providing it to anybody who believes it. I don't know. But Space Force, that's the important new entrant here.
It's going to be overturned.
What do you think Space Force has?
Space Force is a military branch of the, just like the Army, all the military.
I thought that was well spoken. It's a branch of the military, just like a Yeah, no, it's a branch of the military. That's what you said. You don't have to, like the Army. Yeah, we know that's a branch of the military. But okay, all right. So she's on the spot. Can't hold that against her.
And they literally, walk up here, they literally, the night of the election, they literally watched the election be stolen.
Literally.
They know, they watermarked the ballots.
Ah, the watermarks.
They know exactly what happened with every ballot. They know what fake ballots, all right?
They know what fake ballots. All right? Yeah, all right. So she's skipping words. I mean, my rhetoric is not that much clearer either when I'm on a roll, but that's interesting. A Space Force. I had no idea.
They knew the election switches. They know what countries were involved. They followed the money. They know what every politician that's been paid off. They know there was 269,000 sealed indictments. But
now that's a new interesting fact. 269, I think it was 260,000. I think it was 269,000 sealed indictments that we're waiting for. And by the way, I can hear Rocket Man playing in the background, and I'm not certain why that's another of the tunes, but maybe it has something to do with North Korea and when he called them Rocket Man. I don't know. And so they're poking fun at it. I don't know why they love Elton John so much at these rallies. Anyway, 269,000 sealed indictments. But guess what? It gets worse.
But I think it might even be up to 500,000 sealed indictments.
I think it might be twice the number of sealed indictments, or 0 sealed indictments, as the case may be.
And I believe that we're going to have an emergency broadcast, and the military is going to come in with martial law.
Well, good.
And we are going to be shown 8 hours on, 8 hours off of videos for 7 days.
Very specific plan.
And they're going to be showing us taped tribunals, taped confessions.
Yeah.
And the world is going to be awakened to what's really going on with the deep state.
Yeah, I'm thinking that it might not happen that way, but it's good to know that there's a new theory out there. So I guess if we start seeing references to Space Force, we'll have some idea of what's going on. I've alerted you to it. On the other hand, if you never see any further reference to Space Force, that just means that she's just her own special brand of cuckoo, and there's nothing we can do about it. But I mean, that's out there. I just found that interesting. As a subject for a Monday, let's say. And I did suggest yesterday that perhaps as bipartisan compromise, we could just make this person dictator for life, and then all of our problems would go away. And I think that's really the only fair solution. And quite honestly, it disturbs me that Democrats won't sit down at the kitchen table and consider this very rational option. All right, let's see. In other weird and crazy news, this is an interesting piece. I didn't consider this as a possibility, but Donald Trump has figured out another way to try to steal money from people. I mean, I figured he would, but yeah, and that's his special genius, is you find new ways of conducting those thefts or whatever. And it's worth noting. Wonkette has reported on the reporting. The New York Times, I think, is the first to, actually come up with this report. But Wonkette will treat it so much more interestingly, I think. Dr. Zoom, writing over at Wonkette, Trump's White House photographer planned a book. She, I don't know who it is actually, was coming out with a book, but Donald wanted a piece of the action. These are photographs of me. I want to be paid for all of this. It's very interesting. The New York Times brings us yet another reminder that nothing, absolutely nothing, was ever normal in the Trump administration. Apart from the shakedown schemes in foreign policy and the blithe indifference to mere federal law, there was always the grift, the reflexive money grubbing at every opportunity. As the Times reports, that extended even into Trump's treatment of his chief White House photographer, Sheila Craighead. I guess that answers the question if I've pronounced the name correctly. It's Sheila is my guess at the spelling of Shealah. And I don't know whether that's a new and inventive spelling or whether it's a traditional Irish, maybe Gaelic type spelling, I have no idea. But it's interesting and fun. We'll give it that. And Sheila Craighead, as White House photographer, I don't know if she's the one. I'd hate to have my name attached to being the Trump White House photographer, not just because Trump White House is poison, but the photography coming out of the Trump White House in particular was atrocious, like really bad C-grade level, bar mitzvah photos. Just awful. Everything. Every photo of every group was lineups and everybody, facing inward with Trump at the center, giving his big fake grin and the thumbs up and stuff, as opposed to like the much more artistic and interesting Pete Souza, art approach to White House photography, where, there was intimate pictures of interaction that really gave a better, more interesting look at things. But Trump likes to stage things like events, like the weddings he crashes all the time. That's how photography is. So that's how I want, society pages and weddings is how this is done. Anyway, near the end of Trump's time in office, Craighead let Trump's people know that she planned to put together a book of her work covering Trump because she wants to cash in. Why not? Something that the White House photographers have been doing since the Reagan years. I mean, yeah. Why not? They documented it and their photos are nice. You should take a look. Maybe the, quote, president could write a brief foreword for the book. The word came back that sure, he'd be glad to, but only if Craighead would give him a cut of her advance from the publisher. But that was just the start. Apparently, the idea of a nice coffee table book of White House photos really appealed to Trump. So, shortly afterward, and a quote here from, I guess, the Times, Mr. Trump's team asked Ms. Craighead to hold off on her book project to allow the former president to take Ms. Craighead's photos and those of other White House staff photographers and publish his own book, which is now selling for as much as $230 a copy, which I'm sure he's just selling to his supporters on the website. After all, since they're all produced at taxpayer expense, and we should remember that, right? Those are public domain photos. White House photos aren't copyrighted by the photographers. They're automatically in the public domain, so Craighead couldn't very well complain. But still, you were in possession of all the prints, and you could edit and put together a nice collection, and people will pay for the convenience of having the collection put together with some commentary if you're a person of sound mind, talking about the situations and what you remember about the situations as you were taking the photos. Or if you're a lunatic and serving a lunatic president, maybe people would be interested in a lunatic's recollection of what went on. Anyway, Trump would no doubt say she was a sucker for agreeing to a deal like that in the first place. Anyway, all of her photos being in the public domain. Hilariously, when the Times requested comment from Trumpland, Trump spokesperson Taylor Budowich explained it was all perfectly fine. He didn't even dispute that Trump had wanted a cut of the advance in exchange for writing the foreword. Most importantly, Budowich emphasized that Trump's book was way better and classier than anything that peon photographer could have come up with. And here are more quotes from the Times. Instead, Mr. Budowich said Mr. Trump decided to do his own book first, a separate deal that came with a much bigger multi-million-dollar advance. President Trump has always had an eye for beautiful and engaging curation, which came alive through the pages of this book, he said in a statement. He's good with the words. He's just a liar. Anyway, that's pretty interesting. So he's made the couple of bucks. And by the way, the photographer who took the pictures, it's a picture book. But the photographer who took the picture, did she get a cut of the advance or the sales or anything? No. And interesting, though, that Trump, I guess because he knows book deals. I don't want a portion of sales. I want a cut of the advance. The money I know you actually got. Give that to me now. Whatever you sell on the back end, I'll come after you later for that. Anyway, just to make sure nobody got any big ideas about taking the emphasis off the great man, the book itself, titled Our Journey Together, doesn't bother with trivialities like photo credits because who cares anyway? Craighead's name appears only on the last page of his book, although the bulk of the photos were taken by her. She should be very grateful that the book thanks the unimportant nobodies who took the pictures, and even graciously calls them, quote, all the phenomenal White House photographers. So shut up, your name's on a list in there. Mind you, Craighead herself wasn't about to criticize Trump. Instead, she told the Times she didn't want to comment on any former client, although she also has decided to drop her own plans for a book, at least for the time being. I stay apolitical as possible, as I am a neutral historical documentarian, she said. By staying neutral, I am able to remain a keen observer of people standing in lines. Translation, please let me move on from that crap show, we'll say, even though that doesn't really work, with at least some shreds of my dignity. No, you can't. Can't be done. The Times notes that while previous presidents have used White House photographers' work in their own memoirs, Trump appears to have been the first former president to try to make money from a book planned by a former White House photographer, according to documentarian John Bradar, who knows stuff about the White House photography game. We also learn that while most previous White House photographers had cordial relationships with presidents, think of Pete Souza's skill at capturing Barack Obama's basic decency and occasional goofiness, Craighead only got the job after Trump's first pick fell through. Interesting. Which we'll assume means the photographer knew how Trump treats anyone working for him and noped out. And instead of having most White House photographers full access, Craighead was very much treated as a flunky. These are just about the saddest, most infuriating 2 paragraphs in the Times story. And they read like this. Mr. Trump at times would say insulting things about Ms. Craighead, telling other White House guests that he questioned her skills as a photographer, surprising other White House officials and photographers present. Mr. Trump, I question him too. He's not wrong about that. Mr. Trump, a former White House aide, said was intensely involved in selecting photos of himself that would be released to the public, with former Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham recalling how during long flights on Air Force One, he often set aside time to review folders of photographs after demanding that they first be printed so he could hold them and pick winners one at a time and then give one a rose. He's so old-timey and not busy either as president, so that's good news. Fabric swatches and photos of himself. Honestly, Ms. Craighead should probably just thank her lucky stars that as an employee of the White House she actually got paid, which is more than a lot of people who've worked for Trump can say. Also, too, the story notes that after the Times contacted Mar-a-Gulago, that's funny, for comment on the photo book, Trump very generously called Craighead the first time since he left office. Mr. Trump told her he was still prepared to write a foreword for a photo book that they could do together in the future. Mr. Berdowich said it would be fun to do so, Mr. Trump told her after stealing her idea. The Times didn't report whether Trump also offered to let Craighead keep a small cut of the profits from any such venture. Your Wonkette is funded. Oh, yeah, so this is their fundraising reminder at the end. And by all means, you should absolutely throw them a couple of bucks to remain operating, just like you should be doing for us at all times, although they don't really have the opportunity to put it in their articles. This article was read on the air by David Waldman over at Kagro in the Morning, and you should throw him a couple of bucks. But, you know, they put together the content. I just read it and comment on it, and I don't know. You're paying for the comments. I think a fair shakeout of the way things work. Okay, except for the fact that we don't get bazillions of dollars, and I can't give tons of it to everyone else who works to make this show a success, including my family that puts up with it. How about that? All right, let's see. A couple other items that I might be able to fit in here before the end. Let me... there's the Ohio story. Maybe because I brought that up, I should close out with this update from OhioCapitalJournal.com if you want to find them online. We don't know all the names of the players here because we haven't been up to speed on what's been happening in Ohio, but we'll just read it as and learn the names as it goes along. In the headline here, LaRose, who's LaRose? We'll find out. If you're in Ohio, you know. LaRose would, quote, be fine with Chief Justice's impeachment over redistricting rulings. Ohio elections chief says O'Connor's has violated her oath by rejecting GOP-drawn districts. Reported here by Marty Schladen back on April 1st. Not a joke, though, apparently. Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, that's who LaRose is, on Friday said he, quote, certainly wouldn't oppose it. I don't know if he has any opportunity to. certainly wouldn't oppose it if the legislature impeached Ohio Supreme Court Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor over her joining in rulings rejecting GOP-generated maps for Congress and the legislature, according to a recording of a breakfast meeting with Union County Republicans. LaRose, who is not a lawyer, said in the recording his fellow Republican, quote, violated her oath of office by making up what she wants the law to say instead of interpreting what it actually says, except it actually says what she says. So that's weird. O'Connor joined the court's 3 Democrats in ruling multiple times that the congressional and legislative maps approved by a majority vote of Republicans violated the Ohio Constitution by unfairly favoring the GOP. And you'll recall, perhaps, that this is the state where they pulled that really crazy stunt where, again, the mandate is to make the districts match the statewide vote share, which was, in fact, about 55-45, and that the Republicans came up with a formula whereby they said, well, we looked at the last 11 statewide races, and Republicans won, 10 out of the 11 or 8 out of the 10 or whatever the numbers were of the last couple of statewide races. So that's an 80% plus record in statewide races, and so therefore the district should be drawn 80-20 or 85-15 in favor of Republicans, as opposed to like the real meaning, which was, well, each one of those races was about 55-45. That means vote share, not results of elections share. The vote share was 55-45. Your whole model is insane. Well, then we'll impeach you. That's really what they're trying to do there. Wow. Okay. Some Republican members of the legislature had previously raised the possibility of impeaching O'Connor, who will leave office at the end of the year. I guess it's term-limited stuff there. But LaRose, the state's top elections official, is apparently the first of the 5 Republicans on the state's 7-member redistricting commission to say he'd go along with it. Huh. And I don't know, like, does he have a role in the impeachment? I don't quite understand that, but we'll have to study the Ohio situation here. Such calls to effectively end the career of a judge because her rulings didn't go the GOP's way have been too extreme for at least one other Republican on the commission, and that is Governor Mike DeWine, who might be cautious about these things just personally, but he also might be cautious about these things because his son is on the Supreme Court, which is also weird. This is an extraordinary measure to take, he said when the idea was floated earlier this month. I think we don't want to go down that pathway because we disagree with a decision by a court, because we disagree with a decision by an individual judge or justice. Not a good idea. So he might just be personally disinclined to it. LaRose's spokesman sent a transcript of the secretary's comments about O'Connor. The spokesman was also asked whether LaRose believes judges should be removed whenever LaRose thinks they misinterpret the law, and whether such a belief undermines the entire purpose of having courts. It's a big question. The spokesman, Rob Nichols, didn't respond to an email and a phone call. Nichols did, however, respond to Cleveland.com after the Capital Journal published this story. We're uncomfortable allowing LaRose's comment to speak for itself, he told the news organization. Wow. Oh, I'm sorry. Wow. I was like, that's an incredible statement. No, I'm sorry. We're comfortable allowing LaRose's comment to speak for itself. I mean, that's what I thought that they would say, which is a non-answer, but uncomfortable was like, oh, we don't know what to say. That would have been fantastic as an answer. But it wasn't it. We're comfortable. We're fine with it. We're not going to, support it or deny it, or we don't know what to say. So that's the standard answer. We're comfortable allowing it to speak for itself. LaRose made his comments about O'Connor at the Union County Republican breakfast on Friday, according to a recording obtained by the Capital Journal. The source of the recording provided it on the condition of anonymity. County Republican Party Chair Justin Hogan didn't immediately respond to an email requesting comment. On the recording, the Secretary of State was asked, can you talk about the ex-Republican O'Connor? Should she be impeached? So not a neutral question here. Ex-Republican, is she kicked out? Or are they planning that? LaRose replied, I think that she has not upheld her oath of office, and that to me is a basic test of a public servant. That's up to the state legislature. the answer, whether they want to impeach the Chief Justice or not. I certainly wouldn't oppose it. He was referring to repeated rulings in which O'Connor sided with the court's Democrats and saying that maps passed by the Republican majority on the redistricting commission were illegally gerrymandered. In recent statewide elections, voters have supported Republicans by a roughly 54 to 46 margin. There we go. Confirmation of those numbers. But the maps produced by Republicans favor the party to have much greater representation in the legislature and Congress. They violate constitutional amendments overwhelmingly passed by Ohio voters requiring that the partisan makeup of the state legislature and congressional delegation resemble the general partisan makeup of the state, O'Connor has ruled. GOP members of the commission were called to the state Supreme Court on Monday to show why they shouldn't be held in contempt after ignoring maps generated by independent commissioners and passing another set of maps that again heavily favors Republicans. The impasse has created a constitutional crisis in Ohio, with deadlines approaching for the primary but no district boundaries in which candidates can run. LaRose on Friday acknowledged that impeaching O'Connor wouldn't end the crisis, but on the recording said it might, quote, feel really good. And hey, it might. As a matter of fact, it would only heighten the crisis. It would create a constitutional crisis all by itself, doubling the amount or the number of crises they were facing. That would be some tremendous reaction to that. I don't know if it'll solve our current problem because the impeachment process would take a couple months and we're going to need to have district lines way before that, he said. And so it may feel really good and it may be the right thing to do. It wouldn't, because she violated her oath of office by making up what she wants the law to say instead of interpreting what it actually says. But I don't know if it would accomplish much. But I'd be fine with it if they did. Upside down and backwards, but they love creating constitutional crises, these guys.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, it's really rather incredible, but I'm glad I at least got somewhat up to speed on that. Of course, I missed some other stories, but that's what Justice Putnam is here for, although really he's here entirely for his own reasons. In fact, he was here first, and I am the interloper in all of this. So stay tuned to find out what he's got on tap for you from around the country and around the world next.